So I want you to picture something. You know that feeling when you go to your absolute favorite restaurant?
Oh, yeah, like the one you've been hyping up to everyone for years.
Right, exactly. The place where you had your first date or, I don't know, celebrated that big promotion. You walk in, and right away, before you even sit down, something just feels off.
The lighting is maybe a little harsher, or the greeting is just a little colder.
Exactly. You sit down, and the table is slightly sticky. There's no physical menu anymore, just a QR code taped to the table.
Ugh, I hate that.
Right. And it forces you to download some third-party app, make an account, and agree to a privacy policy just to see what they're serving.
And the app immediately asks if you want to add a 20% tip before you've even ordered a glass of tap water.
Yes. So you finally order, the service is incredibly slow, and when the food finally arrives, the portions are literally half the size they used to be. You take a bite, waiting for that amazing flavor you remember, and it just tastes bland.
Like it's mass-produced.
Yeah, like it came out of a plastic bag and went straight into a microwave. The magic is completely gone.
But you eat it anyway because you're hungry.
Exactly. And then they hand you the bill. It is twice as high as your last visit. And when you look closely, there's a surprise convenience fee, a kitchen appreciation fee, and like a dynamic pricing surcharge tacked onto the bottom.
Which is just infuriating.
You were sitting there staring at this outrageous bill for a genuinely mediocre meal, feeling completely ripped off. But then you look over at the bar, and the restaurant manager is popping a bottle of expensive champagne.
Wow.
Yeah, they are high-fiving the owner. They are celebrating because their profit margins have literally never been better.
So they're making record money off of a demonstrably, objectively worse experience.
Exactly. And let's unpack this, because how does that even work? That specific feeling, that cocktail of frustration and feeling financially squeezed, that is exactly what it feels like to be a consumer of culture and entertainment right now. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are on a very specific mission to answer a frustrating question that I know you, listening right now, have asked yourself recently. Why does everything we do for fun cost so much more, but feel so much worse?
It's basically the defining paradox of our current economy. We are paying luxury prices for a bargain bin reality.
It really is.
And-
And I mean, quick question for you. Why does it feel like sports, for example, the thing we're supposed to love and escape into, are worse than ever?
Oh, that is such a good point.
Isn't it weird that while diehard fans complain louder than ever, the leagues are making more money? Like billions of dollars level money.
Yeah, the disconnect is massive.
Whether it's the UFC pushing lackluster fights or college football entirely realigning just for TV cash, or the WWE raising ticket prices for shows fans think are creatively flat, it feels like the product is getting worse and the executives just do not care.
I really don't. And to figure out how we got here, we are pulling from a massive stack of sources today. We're going to build this case piece by piece.
We've got economic reports and cultural analyses. We're looking at a major study from Harvard Business School, historical data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and deep box office analysis from FilmTake.
We're also diving into the Groundwork Collaborative's report on something they call the annoyance economy.
I love that term.
It's so accurate. And we're pulling insights from the Brookings Institution, Senator Bob Casey's office, Digital Content Next, and layering in cultural commentary from places like Higher Ed Gamma and Freakonomics.
It is a really diverse stack of data. You've got macroeconomics sitting right next to pop culture critiques. But when you synthesize it all, it paints a very clear and honestly somewhat alarming picture of how corporate mechanics have fundamentally mutated over the last 2 decades.
It's going to completely reframe how you think about the power of your own wallet.
So here is our blueprint for this deep dive. We're going to start with the hook, looking at the reality you are living in right now. Then we're going to dive into the historical backstory to see how price and quality actually used to interact.
Because it wasn't always like this.
Right. Then we'll reveal the real story of the corporate mechanics driving this shift. We'll lay out the hard facts across different industries, from the NFL to Spotify to Broadway. We'll ask some deeper questions, and finally, wrap it up with a thought that will change how you look at your next subscription bill.
Let's get into it.
So let's start with the hook. Think about the last time you went to the movies, or bought a concert ticket, or signed up for a streaming service. The prices have doubled over the last few years. The fees are astronomical. Getting a ticket on Ticketmaster feels like fighting a literal war.
It's exhausting.
And yet, the movie you finally sit down to watch is a mediocre sequel you've essentially seen 3 times already. The concert requires a second mortgage, and you're sitting a mile away.
Or your favorite streaming show just got canceled after one season, leaving you on a cliffhanger forever.
Yes, you're paying a massive premium for an experience that feels increasingly degraded. And the tension here, the central mystery of this entire deep dive, is that while you're complaining louder than ever, the corporations behind these products are raking in billions.
The financial reality is completely detached from the public sentiment. Historically, under traditional capitalist models, if a product's quality dropped, the company suffered. The market would correct it because consumers would flee.
Right, they'd go somewhere else.
But right now, we are seeing a landscape where consumer frustration and corporate profitability are rising on the exact same grass at the exact same time.
Which makes me wonder, has the focus completely shifted away from the diehard fans who actually built these industries? Like, are these companies now just farming casual consumers?
That is the pivotal question. Are they farming us? Because they know they've hacked the system so that actual genuine quality doesn't matter as long as the revenue numbers look good.
Like, look at WWE. They moved WrestleMania to Vegas because of its record-breaking gate in LA the year before, right?
Like WrestleMania 39 in Los Angeles broke records with over $21 million in gate revenue.
Which is insane. But now they're pricing tickets for Vegas so high it's alienating their diehard fans, and the event isn't even selling out right away. And fans on forums are consistently calling the product creatively stagnant. So what changed? Let's dig into why sports and entertainment in general feel broken.
To understand how they might be pulling this off, we can't just look at today. We have to look at the baseline. How is the relationship between price and quality actually supposed to function in a healthy market?
Well, I was digging into this massive 100-year data set from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, just looking at how inflation used to work. And what blew my mind was that price and value used to have a highly logical, almost physical relationship.
It wasn't this abstract corporate game. It was a very real push and pull.
Exactly. Let's look closely at the BLS Consumer Price Index, or CPI, specifically the period from 1913 to 1929.
The data shows that prices fluctuated wildly, but they fluctuated based on actual real-world supply, demand, and global crises.
Right, like World War I. During the war, you had massive inflation. The supply chains were shattered, resources were being diverted.
By June 1920, the 12-month CPI increase was 23.7%. The prices of basic staples, things like round steak and potatoes, absolutely doubled.
It was painful for the consumer, obviously, but it made logical economic sense. There were fewer potatoes, so potatoes cost more.
But what goes up used to actually come down. That's the crucial difference.
Right. As the economy adjusted, the war ended, and a post-war recession hit, you saw severe deflation.
From June 1920 to June 1921, the BLS notes that prices dropped nearly 16%. Over the next year, they dropped another 20%.
So if the market was flooded with goods, or if consumer demand dropped because people didn't have money, prices actually went down to meet the consumer where they were.
You paid for what you got. The power dynamic was balanced. If a business wanted your money, they had to offer a price and a quality that justified it.
Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture of cultural history, there used to be a very similar push and pull in entertainment. The market rewarded risk and quality because that was the only way to win the consumer's dollar.
According to some brilliant cultural commentary from Higher Ed Gamma, if you look back at the 1970s, you saw an absolute explosion of genuine cultural innovation.
Oh, totally. You had punk rock emerging in grimy clubs in New York and London. You had disco taking over, the birth of hip-hop in the Bronx, new wave.
It was a golden age of risk-taking. And it wasn't just because people were suddenly more creative. It was an economic imperative. Studios and record labels invested in unknown artists and weird scripts because that was how you captured the market's attention.
You couldn't just rely on a brand name. Innovation was the literal currency of success.
But today, Higher Ed Gamma argues we are in a massive creative drought.
Creative drought. That phrase perfectly describes the feeling of scrolling through a streaming platform for an hour, looking at hundreds of titles, and feeling like there is absolutely nothing to watch.
Because cultural recycling is the new norm. It's prequels, sequels, sprawling cinematic universes where you have to watch 6 TV shows to understand one movie.
Or jukebox musicals on Broadway taking the songs of 1980s pop star and wrapping a thin plot around them. The industry has aggressively moved away from the risk of innovation.
They've settled into a highly managed loop of nostalgia.
Okay, but if the product is just recycled nostalgia, how are they making so much money? This is where I want to look at the movie industry right now, using this incredible box office analysis from FilmTake, because the numbers here are staggering.
They really are. Before the pandemic, the U.S. box office was fundamentally a volume business. They routinely sold 1.25 to 1.35 billion tickets a year.
The goal was simple, right? Get as many human beings into the theater as possible.
Exactly. And volume requires broad appeal, which historically requires a baseline of consistent quality and word-of-mouth excitement. If a movie was bad, word spread and the volume dropped.
But fast forward to their projections for 2025. The actual number of tickets sold has plummeted. We're talking a drop from 1.23 billion in 2019 down to just 764 million.
That is hundreds of millions of people who have simply stopped going to the movies. In any normal era, that would mean the industry was collapsing.
But here's the magic trick. Guess what happened to the total revenue? It didn't crash proportionately. It stayed hovering right around $8.6 billion.
And we have to explain exactly how they managed that.
They managed it because the average ticket price surged from $9.16 to $11.31, plus all the upcharges for IMAX, 3D, and luxury recliners.
They aren't growing the audience with great must-see movies. They're just monetizing a shrinking audience much, much more aggressively.
FilmTake explicitly points out that this is a structural reset. It's vital to understand that this isn't a temporary post-pandemic slump. They aren't holding their breath waiting for the audience to rebound.
No, this is a permanently smaller market being reframed by corporate executives as stabilization. They have realized they can extract more money per visit while entirely losing their broad cultural reach.
But hold on, let's go back to my restaurant analogy from the beginning. If a local mom-and-pop store, or let's use the Sari Sari stores analyzed in the International Journal of Research and Innovation in Social Science that we looked at in our research packet, if those small, independent businesses raise their prices while cutting the quality, their sales drop.
Right, people just go next door.
That is basic fundamental economics, but these giant entertainment companies raise prices, lose hundreds of millions of customers, provide a recycled product, and they still win. How are they defying basic gravity? Why can't we just go next door?
Because your restaurant analogy breaks down when we look at how the modern economy is structured. In the real world, you can go next door. In the modern corporate landscape, there is no next door.
Wait, what do you mean?
To understand why, we have to look at the transition into what Phenomenal World calls the franchise era of the economy. This is the crucial shift in corporate mechanics that explains everything.
Okay, break that down for me. What exactly is the franchise era?
Historically, if a company wanted to grow and make more money, they had to invest heavily in physical capital. They had to build new factories, manufacture physical products, hire thousands of workers. Growth required immense physical risk.
Okay, sure.
But today, the most profitable companies in the world have shifted away from making things. They have moved to a model based entirely on intellectual property rights or IPR monopolies.
So it's about owning the idea of the thing, not necessarily making the thing yourself.
Exactly. Think of a company like Hilton. Hilton is a massive hospitality empire. They own the loyalty programs, they own thousands of trademarks, but they own barely 1% of the actual physical buildings carrying their name.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they just license the IP to real estate developers. Or look at Disney. Disney owns the Marvel Universe, the Star Wars universe, Pixar. In this franchise era, the holding companies at the very top require an incredibly low headcount.
Right.
They don't need to invest heavily in new productive capacity. And because they own the exclusive intellectual property, they hold total unassailable leverage.
Oh, I see. Because if I want to see a Star Wars movie, I can only go to one place. I can't go to the mom and pop studio next door because they legally cannot give me Star Wars. The IP is a monopoly.
Precisely. And this is exactly what's happening in sports, too. The NFL, the NBA, the UFC, they are massive IPR monopolies.
Oh, yeah. That makes total sense. All of these big sports leagues started out by trying to build something people loved. They gave you what felt real or exciting, and loyalty grew from there.
But as they've gotten bigger, the focus has shifted. It's not about the fans filling the seats anymore. It's the streaming rights, the massive sponsorship deals, and the billion-dollar franchise sales.
It's like they cracked the code. They're like, hey, if the revenue numbers are up, who cares if the fans are rolling their eyes?
Exactly. When leagues prioritize corporate dollars, diehard fans get the short end of the stick. Take the NBA, for example. Rule changes over the years like shortened shot clocks and increased fouls on defense were made to increase scoring.
Because flashy highlight reels sell.
Right. But hardcore fans say the quality of play isn't what it used to be. Or take the UFC. Some fans argue that they're promoting fighters based on hype and social media presence, not skill or rankings.
But guess what? Those hype-built fights still make big pay-per-view numbers, even if the outcomes disappoint purists. It's not that the leagues don't know what they're doing, it's that the fans they're catering to aren't necessarily you anymore.
They're looking at the casual viewer, the tourist who doesn't care about the nuance. And honestly, that model works for them.
And when you combine that with the digital era, the economics become absurd, especially regarding marginal cost. Explain marginal cost for us, just so we're all on the same page.
Marginal cost is how much it costs a company to produce one additional unit of a product. In the old days, if Blockbuster wanted to rent out 1 million copies of a movie, they had to physically manufacture 1 million VHS tapes, put them in plastic cases, and ship them. The marginal cost was high.
They had to pay for the plastic and the trucks.
But today, the marginal cost of Netflix streaming an extra copy of a movie to a brand new subscriber is essentially zero. It's just server space.
So the cost of distribution has plummeted to zero, and they own all the IP monopolies. That gives them all the leverage. But honestly, that still doesn't explain why they are actively choosing to squeeze us so hard right now.
What do you mean?
I mean, they have low overhead, zero distribution costs. They could just maintain normal prices, give us great art or great sports, and still enjoy massive profits. Why this aggressive, painful squeeze?
The brutal reality, and we have the data to prove this, is that companies are raising prices and lowering the relative quality simply because they can, and because they know you won't do anything about it.
Because they can. That is infuriating. Prove it to me.
Let's look at the Harvard Business School study authored by Alexander McKay. This wasn't a small sample size. They analyzed 14.4 million retail products across 133 different categories.
That is a massive look at consumer goods.
It is. And the study revealed that from 2006 to 2019, product markups, the amount they charge over what it costs them, climbed by about 25%.
A 25% increase in markups.
Huh.
Okay, but maybe materials got more expensive. Maybe labor got more expensive.
That is the logical assumption, but it's wrong. Here is the absolute kicker of the HBS study. Over that exact same period, the actual marginal costs of producing those goods dropped by 2.1% annually.
Nate, stop. The costs went down every year.
Yes. Companies were getting more efficient, supply chains were optimizing, technology was making production cheaper.
But instead of passing those savings on to you, the consumer, which is what textbook economics says should happen in a competitive market, they kept all the savings, padded their margins, and then raised the prices on you anyway.
Exactly. They severed the relationship between cost of production and retail price. And this brings us to a concept from the Groundwork Collaborative that perfectly encapsulates the era we are living in. They call it the annoyance economy.
I have to say, I love this term, the annoyance economy. It is so visceral. It perfectly captures that specific blood pressure spike you get when you're trying to do a basic task online.
It's very real, and it's incredibly expensive. The Groundwork Collaborative report calculates that the annoyance economy costs Americans $165 billion a year.
$165 billion on what?
On the time and money wasted on surprise junk fees, impossible cancellation processes, complex auto renewals, and endless customer service loops. It's the economic value of your wasted time.
I read in their data that the time consumers spend on hold with customer service is up 60% over the past 2 decades. They have literally weaponized our frustration.
They know that if they make the process of fixing a mistake painful enough, we will just give up and let them keep the money.
Let's do a deep dive into the user interface of a cancellation screen. The report notes that making it incredibly difficult to cancel a subscription can boost corporate revenues by more than 200%. Think about the psychological warfare of that.
It's those dark patterns. You want to sign up for a service that takes 1 click and Apple Pay, less than 3 seconds, but you want to cancel.
Oh, it's a nightmare. First, you have to log in on a desktop computer. The app won't let you do it. Then you have to find the account settings, which are hidden under 3 submenus.
You click Cancel, and you are hit with a warning screen. Are you sure you want to lose all your saved data? You click Yes. Then you are hit with a promotional offer.
Stay now for 50% off your next month. You click No. Then, in some cases, you are literally told you have to call a 1-800 number during business hours to finalize the cancellation.
And when you call, you sit on hold for 45 minutes listening to smooth jazz, interrupted by a robot telling you how important your call is.
They know that a massive percentage of human beings, people who are tired from work, stressed about their kids, overwhelmed by life, will simply hit a wall of decision fatigue. They will say, I'll do this tomorrow.
And tomorrow becomes next month. And the company gets another $14.99, multiply that by millions of users, and you have a multi-billion-dollar business model built entirely on consumer exhaustion.
And the Groundwork Collaborative report actually points to a specific regulatory shift that enabled this. They argue that the Trump administration rolled back several consumer protection regulations, things like airline refund requirements and certain financial oversights.
Right. Now, we're just conveying the report's economic claims here. We're not taking a political stance, but their data clearly suggests that when you strip away regulatory oversight, the environment immediately pivots to favor corporate friction over consumer ease.
When nobody is forcing them to play fair, they don't. It creates a landscape where the burden of proof, the burden of time, and the burden of effort is shifted entirely onto the consumer. And this friction is everywhere.
It's infecting the one place we go to escape this stuff, our entertainment. United States Senator Bob Casey's office actually released a report looking specifically at how this hits entertainment, and they coined the term streamflation.
Streamflation is the perfect example of the pivot from user acquisition to user extraction. Think about the life cycle of a streaming platform. In the beginning, they are desperate for you to join. They offer massive catalogs of incredible shows, no ads, and it's $8 a month.
But over a couple of years, once they have you, the extraction begins. They start quietly removing content you love to save on residual payouts. They implement restrictive password sharing rules.
Then, the ultimate betrayal. They start inserting unskippable ads into the tier you are already paying for. And then, as the cherry on top, they hike the monthly price. The product gets objectively worse, but your bill goes up.
Which brings us back to the Harvard Business School study and the most important question of this entire deep dive. If the product is getting worse and the price is going up, why don't we just cancel?
Right. I mean, I said it earlier. If the restaurant is bad, stop going. If the streaming service is full of ads and canceled shows, hit the button. Why are we still paying?
Because Alexander McKay's research found a truly damning statistic about human behavior. He found that consumers in 2019 were 30% less price sensitive than they were in 2006.
Hold on. That makes no sense to me. Inflation is a massive issue. People are stressed about the cost of groceries, housing, gas. You're telling me that despite all that financial anxiety, people care less about price hikes?
It's counterintuitive, but it's true. Being less price sensitive in this context doesn't mean we don't care about the money. It means we are significantly less likely to change our behavior because of a price hike.
Oh, I see.
We are less likely to abandon our favorite brands and seek out cheaper alternatives, even when they actively gouge us. We complain on social media, we leave angry comments, but we do not actually cancel the service.
So what does this all mean? Why are we doing this to ourselves? Are we just gluttons for punishment? Or do we simply have nowhere else to go?
It's largely the fact that you have nowhere else to go. We live in a winner-take-all economy where an incredibly small number of massive holding companies own almost everything.
Highred Gamma points this out brilliantly. You think you have choices, but you don't. Disney owns Fox, meaning they absorbed one of their biggest historical rivals. In the music industry, 3 major record labels, Universal, Sony, and Warner, control roughly 70% of the entire global music market.
If you buy a book, there is a massive probability it comes from one of just 5 publishers who control the vast majority of the market.
The illusion of choice is the greatest trick the modern economy ever pulled. You cannot effectively vote with your wallet if the exact same holding company owns all the wallets.
When an industry consolidates into an oligopoly, a market shared by a tiny number of producers, those companies realize something very quickly. They don't need to compete on quality or price anymore. It's actually a waste of resources to try and out-innovate each other.
They just need to manage their shared dominance. They all raise prices together. They all introduce ads together. Where are you going to run to?
Okay, so we've established the economic theory here. We've talked about oligopolies, marginal costs, and behavioral fatigue. But I want to dig into the hard facts. Let's look at the numbers to see just how deep this phenomenon goes.
Let's look at sports revenues first, since we touched on that earlier. The NFL made $122 billion from its TV deals through 2033, even as viewership for regular games has flattened or dipped.
That is astronomical. And the UFC. Over half of their 2022 revenue, $1.4 billion, came from pay-per-view and sponsorships alone, even as fighters complain about watered-down cards.
And in 2023, the NBA landed an $8 billion merchandise licensing deal, even though viewership for the NBA Finals was 30% lower than it was a decade ago.
It's the exact same story across the board. The numbers are up, but the engagement is stagnant or dropping.
And we see it in movies, too. I want to reiterate that film take data because it's so telling. We have a nearly 40% drop in actual U.S. movie ticket sales from 2019 to 2025. And the industry masked that drop entirely by inflating the ticket prices.
But what is truly eye-opening is how the corporate studios actually view the movie theater now. Theatrical releases are no longer the core profit engine of Hollywood. They are just giant marketing events.
They are downstream funnels. The executives at these studios know that the real money, the predictable recurring revenue that Wall Street loves, is in SVOD, subscription video on demand.
A theatrical run, even if the movie underperforms at the box office, serves a crucial purpose. It builds cultural awareness. It generates memes, so that when the movie hits the streaming platform a month later, it justifies your $15 a month subscription.
It keeps you from hitting the cancel button. And speaking of that, there is fascinating data from Digital Content Next, referencing a study by Hub Entertainment Research. They looked at consumer priorities during times of high economic anxiety. And guess what? Consumers rank video subscriptions as one of the very last things they will cut from their household budget.
That perceived value is incredibly sticky. People will cut back on dining out, they will delay buying clothes, but they will not give up their streaming access. It's their primary coping mechanism. But the platforms know this, and they are testing the absolute limits of our patience.
They are. The study found something really depressing. Only 11% of viewers now say they can't tolerate ads. That number is down from 17% just 4 years ago.
Think about what that means.
People are reluctantly accepting worse experiences, having a premium television show constantly interrupted by loud commercials for car insurance just to save $4 or $5 a month. We are actively being trained to accept a degraded product.
It is a slow, methodical erosion of standards. Now, if we shift our focus to the music and live events industry, this disparity between the corporate class and the creative class becomes even more stark.
Let's look at Spotify and the modern streaming music model. Higher Ed Gamma highlights a statistic that honestly should be front-page news. The top 1% of artists on Spotify receive 77% of all artist revenue.
Let me repeat that. Just so the sheer scale of the inequality lands, 77% of all the money goes to the top 1%.
Yes. And the flip side of that statistic is a staggering reality. 97% of artists on the platform earn less than $1,000 a year. It is the ultimate winner-take-all ecosystem. You are either Taylor Swift or you are making less than a part-time barista.
There's no middle class in music anymore. And this massive consolidation ties directly back to the nostalgia loop and the algorithms we mentioned earlier. Corporations are realizing that legacy catalogs are the new gold rush.
Right. We've seen all these headlines about legacy artists cashing in, like Bob Dylan selling his entire songwriting catalog for an estimated $300 million, or Bruce Springsteen selling his for $500 million.
We have to ask why Wall Street firms and major labels are spending billions to buy old songs. It's because streaming has transformed music from a hit-driven retail business into an infrastructure utility business. It's like buying a water pipeline.
Wait, explain that. How is a Bob Dylan song like a water bill?
Because of the algorithm. If a record label spends $10 million trying to find, develop, and break a new, risky, innovative artist, there's a huge chance that artist fails. It's high risk. But why take that risk when your algorithm can reliably serve up a 40-year-old Bob Dylan hit to millions of passive listeners on a Sunday morning chill playlist?
Oh, I see.
The corporations buy these legacy catalogs because they provide steady, predictable, incredibly low-risk returns. Nostalgia is mathematically safer than innovation. They are harvesting the past because it guarantees a yield.
But if they were just harvesting the past, where does the next Bob Dylan come from?
From a corporate perspective, they don't care. That's a problem for next quarter. Right now, they own the old IP, and that's enough.
And if you want to actually see a live show, if you want to support an artist in person, Good luck. We are seeing absolutely unprecedented pricing for live events. KPBS reported on Taylor Swift's Eras tour, and fans were regularly spending thousands of dollars just to get in the building, not for front row, just to be in the upper decks.
And it's not just stadium pop music. The Freakonomics podcast highlighted the economics of Broadway. They pointed out how theater tickets for major shows are regularly hitting $500 to $800 a seat.
Which is completely insane. Who can afford to take a family of four to a show for $3,000?
Exactly. And charging $800 a seat doesn't just gouge the current consumer, it actively destroys the building of a long-term theater culture.
It destroys the pipeline. If you price out young people, if you price out students and regular middle-class families, who is going to care about Broadway in 20 years?
You are turning a vibrant, culturally essential art form into an exclusive luxury good for the ultra-wealthy. You are trading the long-term survival of the art form for short-term profit extraction.
Which brings us to a really critical part of the facts. What happens to labor and the creative class when all the money is concentrated at the very top?
The Brookings Institution ran the numbers on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the creative sector. The U.S. creative industries lost an estimated 2.7 million jobs and $150 billion in sales.
It was a total wipeout for working artists and crew members, and the recovery has been highly uneven. The holding companies recovered, the workers did not.
But even beyond the shock of the pandemic, there is a massive structural crisis happening right now. The Missing Middle podcast explored how skyrocketing housing costs and stagnant wages are driving the creative class completely out of major cities.
Because it's basic math. If 97% of musicians are making less than $1,000 a year on Spotify, they literally cannot afford rent in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. They have to leave.
Precisely. And creative workers are economic multipliers. They start small businesses, they create vibrant neighborhoods. When cities lose these creatives, they become what urban theorist Richard Florida calls vanilla cities.
Vanilla cities. What does a vanilla city look like?
A vanilla city might look incredibly wealthy on paper. It's full of gleaming luxury condos and expensive chain restaurants, but it is entirely devoid of the cultural dynamism, the weirdness, and the grassroots energy that actually drives long-term economic growth. It becomes a sterile place.
Okay, I have to be honest. Stacking all this up, it sounds incredibly bleak. It makes it sound like this extraction model is just an unavoidable inevitability. But to show that this isn't an inevitable global rule, I want to look at a completely different perspective.
Yes, and this is where another Brookings report on Africa's creative industries provides a brilliant, highly optimistic counterexample.
Right. Let's look at Nollywood, the massive film industry in Nigeria. They are operating on a completely different paradigm. They are producing roughly 2,500 films a year. Their box office receipts are expected to reach nearly $15 billion by 2025.
They are experiencing absolutely explosive growth. And we have to ask why they are booming while the U.S. box office is permanently shrinking.
Because their fundamental business model is the exact opposite of the U.S. entertainment industry right now. Instead of raising prices on a shrinking base of wealthy consumers, they are innovating relentlessly to expand access.
They are leveraging mobile connectivity. They use digital payment platforms like M-Pesa to allow people to pay tiny, highly affordable microtransactions to stream content directly on their phones. They were looking at a rapidly growing middle class and saying, how do we make our product as accessible and affordable as possible?
They want everyone in the tent. Meanwhile, the Western model has shifted toward exclusion and price gouging. It's perfectly illustrated by the luxury brands mentioned in the WRL report we reviewed.
Oh, the handbags.
Yeah. Those luxury fashion brands are literally spurning their regular aspirational shoppers, the middle-class person who saves up for a year to buy one nice bag. The brands are hiking prices on those bags to absurd, unprecedented levels, doubling the price in just a few years, actively alienating the middle class just to cater exclusively to a tiny handful of ultra-rich VIP clients.
It's a strategy of deliberate polarization. They are deciding that the middle class isn't worth their time.
And when you stack all these facts together, from the shrinking U.S. box office to Spotify's brutal payouts to $800 Broadway tickets to luxury bags doubling in price, it forces us to ask some really fundamental questions about the future.
It really is time to transition into what this all means for us, the people actually living in this economy. There's a fascinating economic concept introduced in a study by Rao and Bergen that helps frame this. It's regarding how we buy things we can't test first.
Right. They talk about the difference between search products and experience products.
Yes. A search product is something tangible. It's a hammer or a pair of shoes. You can hold it, you can read the specs, and you know exactly if it's good before you hand over your credit card. The risk is low.
Makes sense.
But an experience product is entirely different. An experience product is a movie, a new song, a live sporting event, or a meal at a fine dining restaurant. You cannot truly judge the quality of that product until after you have already paid for it and consumed it.
So there's an inherent, unavoidable risk for the buyer. I might pay $100 for a UFC pay-per-view, and the main event might be a boring 30-second knockout or a terrible decision.
Exactly. And to mitigate that risk, Wire's historically developed a mechanism. We pay a price premium. We willingly pay a little extra to a reputable seller, a brand we trust, as essentially an insurance policy. We are saying to the studio or the sports league, I am paying you a premium price today, and in exchange, you're promising not to cheat me on the quality.
Because the implied threat is, if you cheat me, I'll never come back, and you lose my future business. The premium buys trust.
That is the fundamental social contract of commerce for experience products. But we have to ask, what happens when that contract breaks down?
That is exactly where we are right now. The contract is broken. The sports leagues, the movie studios, the streaming platforms, they're all still taking the premium price from us. But they are absolutely cheating on the quality because they have realized the ultimate truth. As the HBS study showed, we are 30% less likely to leave.
They don't need to fear losing our future business because we are too exhausted to cancel or because they bought up all the competitors. As the Forrester Research Group points out, this dynamic has ushered us into an era of digital sameness.
Digital sameness, that's a great way to put it. Customer experiences across the board have become stagnant, homogenized, and incredibly frustrating.
Every streaming app looks the same. Every blockbuster movie follows the same algorithmically approved beat sheet. The brands know you don't have many other viable options, so they keep the premium, cut the quality, and rely on digital sameness to keep you anesthetized.
Which leads to a huge area of speculation for me. Do other industries feel this way too? Like, if the product gets bad enough, if the movies are all just boring reboots of toys from the 1980s, if the sports leagues keep changing rules just for TV deals, if the streaming apps are full of ads, will casual fans eventually just tune out entirely?
Have we crossed a Rubicon? FilmTake's analysis suggests that for the movie box office, we already have. They argue the theatrical market didn't just stall during the pandemic, it broke. It is permanently reset at a lower ceiling because audiences woke up and realized the baseline experience of going to the theater now carries more friction and expense than actual reward.
And the scary part is, do the corporate holding companies even care if we tune out? Are sports leagues so financially insulated by massive corporate sponsorships, by TV streaming rights, and by selling our data that actual day-to-day fan attendance no longer moves the needle for them?
This raises an incredibly important question for you, the listener.
Yeah, I want to ask you directly. You're listening to this deep dive. You know exactly what we're talking about. If you know you're getting ripped off, if you hate the junk fees, if you despise the 200% cancellation hurdles, if you are completely exhausted by the endless cinematic universes and the shrinking restaurant portions, why do you keep hitting subscribe? Why do you keep paying? Are we the ones enabling this entire system?
It's a very tough mirror to look into. We like to view ourselves as victims of corporate greed, but we are also active participants in the market. But the consequences of this system, of our continued participation, go far beyond just our monthly budgets. It's about the entire ecosystem of human creativity.
We're talking about the loss of the middle.
Yes. As the Missing Middle podcast highlighted, when you price out the creative class from our major cities, and when you consolidate wealth so intensely that 97% of musicians can't make a living wage, you completely sever the pipeline of future innovation. You destroy the soil that grows new art.
Because think about it. If the only people who can afford to take a risk and be a struggling artist or an independent filmmaker are kids with massive generational wealth who don't have to worry about rent, the stories we get are going to become incredibly narrow. They will be entirely disconnected from the reality of how most people actually live and struggle.
You lose the gritty, ground-level, desperate innovation that gave us movements like punk rock or hip-hop. Those movements were born out of economic struggle. If you price that struggle out of the ability to make art, you just get more sanitized, safe, algorithm-approved content made by people who have never had to worry about a junk fee.
So let's look at the totality of what we've uncovered today. We are caught in an annoyance economy. We are paying higher and higher premiums for stagnant, recycled quality. The actual working creatives who make the things we love are being aggressively priced out of their own industries, and the corporations are celebrating record profits. Where does this leave us? Let's wrap it up.
It leaves us looking at a system that is functioning exactly as it was redesigned to function. It is not broken, it is optimized.
Why does it feel like entertainment is getting worse, but the executives don't care? Because they have hacked the system. Through massive corporate consolidation, they systematically eliminated the competition. Through IPR monopolies, they ensured they exclusively own the only brands and teams and characters you care about.
Through algorithms, they prioritize safe, predictable nostalgia over risky, exciting innovation.
And by betting on our own behavioral exhaustion, our decreasing price sensitivity, they realize that our money talks much, much louder than our complaints on the internet.
If we connect all of this to the bigger picture, we have fundamentally moved from a content economy to an access economy. As one of our sources profoundly noted, control beats content. When you control the only platforms that matter, when you are the Spotify, the Netflix, the NFL, the Ticketmaster, you no longer need to make the best product. You don't have to win on quality. You just need to make the only product.
You just need to control the gates and charge a toll. And that brings me to a final lingering thought. Something I want you to really mull over after this deep dive is done. We've spent this whole time blaming the corporations, the algorithms, the monopolies, and the holding companies, and they deserve a lot of the blame. But think about this. Algorithms, at their core, are ultimately just mirrors. They have no agenda other than efficiency. They simply reflect our own actual behavior back at us.
They show us what we actually click on in the dark, not what we loudly say we want in public.
Exactly. If the hard data shows that we will reliably click on a mediocre, safe reboot of a childhood favorite, but we will totally ignore a challenging original piece of art, and if the financial data shows that we will complain endlessly on social media about a $5 price hike and annoying junk fees, but we will never, ever actually push through the friction and cancel our subscription. Are the corporations actually the villains here, or are they just highly efficient machines giving us exactly what our passive behavior demands?
It's a chilling thought. We are voting for this reality every single month.
Think back to that restaurant from the very beginning. The one with the sticky menus, the small portions, the bland food, and the huge fee-laden bill. The manager is popping champagne at the bar for one very simple reason. Because you are still sitting at the table. You are still paying the check. To get the quality back, to force this massive consolidated system to actually care about us again, we might have to do the absolute hardest thing for any consumer to do in the annoyance economy. We might have to be willing to actually stand up, walk out the door, and walk away.